All right, picking up where we left off. The book shows proper connecting cap removal, right? Look, that looks pretty similar. I've got the same rod vise here. Picked that up on Amazon, about $100. Was hoping that I wouldn't have to. Was hoping I could rent one. But I'm finding with more and more tools for this job, the places like Advanced Auto Parts and O'Reilly's and AutoZone, they don't rent these types of things. So, nor do they rent things like angle torque wrenches. So anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove this pin. All right, so I can remove the connecting rod caps, and I'm just gonna go ahead and tighten this down. Okay, just so it's snug. I'm not gonna go crazy on it. And then these bolts, you can use, I think it's 11 millimeters. Let's see, I did have, oh, here it is. Yeah, 11 millimeters. These are on here pretty tight. All right, so we're gonna go to a breaker bar. There we go. All right, just took a little bit of coaxing. There we go. That's how you do it. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and repeat this procedure with all of the caps or the connecting rods. Okay, so I've removed these little caps from each of the connecting rods. I skipped past it because it's the same procedure. All right, so now it says, once the crank is locked in place, which we did by putting the flex plate on, plus one of these little locking devices. See that under there? This bolts up to the starter, and then this has little teeth that goes in and locks the flex plate, and that prevents the crank from turning. All right, once the crank is locked in place, flip the engine on its stand so that it is right side up. Okay, it is right side up. All right, and then install unlubricated rod bearing shells into the rods you are using. Some high performance bearings have chamfered edges as well as distinct upper and lower halves. Be sure to note this. All right, so these are the rod bearings I'm using. These are Moly, Clevite, Performance bearings. There's some numbers in case you have any interest in knowing that. When I shine it to the light here, you can clearly see this says lower, right? And this says upper, all right? So, and there's some other numbers on here which I don't exactly know what they mean. Perhaps I may have to look that up at some point. I'm not sure. But I don't see any other markings on here other than where it says here, Clevite, all right? So it says, oh, is there a chamfered edge? I don't see it. They look the same to me. They feel the same. I don't see any chamfered edges. They look and feel the same, all right? Some high-performance bearings will have chamfered edges as well as distinct upper and lower halves, which it does. There's no need for piston rings during this process. Lightly lubricate the cylinder walls and carefully install both the piston rod assemblies. All right, let's just do this one at a time. So we're going to lightly lubricate the piston walls here. And we're going to start with cylinder number 1, just because. So I'm going to lightly lubricate here, putting some standard SAE 30 oil on here. All right. All right, and I might as well just go ahead and lubricate number 2 as well, because we're going to need to put both of them in. All right, so those are a little extra dab for good measure, all right? So those are lightly lubricated. All right. Now, lightly lubricate the cylinder walls and carefully, everything should be carefully, that's obvious, install both the piston rod assemblies for that crank journal into the block one at a time, tilting the engine on its stand to have the deck surface horizontal for each. All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and do that right now. We're going to tilt the stand. So since we're starting with 1, we're going to tilt it so it's horizontal, right? And then there's a little hole in here where I can lock that into place. All right, they think of everything on these tools. And as we look down in here, we can see the cylinder, and there's the crank journal, yada yada yada. All right, so tilting the engine on its stand to have the deck horizontal. Okay, don't nick the crank journal on the way down. Install the rod caps temporarily. So let's see if I can get an old here. Install the rod caps temporarily so that the piston rods do not fall out when the engine's flipped over. Make the bolts hand tight. Note, we are only using the forwardmost crank journal here, which corresponds to the rod bearings for cylinders 1 and 2. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and put let's go ahead and take this bolt and this bolt out. And then we're going to put, let's see, is this upper? No, that's lower. Is this upper? Will have to be, right? If that's lower. All right, upper. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and line it up here. Stick that in there. All right, looking good. And then we're going to put the lower in here. Easy peasy. So remember, let's see if I get this right now. This goes to the back, right? So this smaller relief valve goes to the back. So it would go like so. Ooh, look at, huh, interesting. All right. And then the chamfer edge goes towards the fillet. So this side here, they're both kind of chamfered, but this one more so goes towards the fillet. Oh, and then we got to put the pin in here. All right. Now remember, we did not put the spiral locks in here yet. So did I do this right? Probably not. This goes to the back. Maybe I did. And then this here chamfer edge goes towards the filet mignon. All right. So let's see, back. Yeah. And remember, it says make sure it doesn't nick up the... Oh, look at that. That's gonna be real nice when it's done. All right. Is that looking good? Looks good to me. All right. So now we're going to put the temporarily. All right, so we got cylinder number 1 in there, looking good. Nice Summit Pro LS. All right, now we are going to repeat the same thing on the other side. So we're gonna flip this over so that's horizontal. Which side goes to the back? This side goes to the back. So it goes in like so. All right. And then we've got the chamfered side goes towards the fillet, which in this case is that way. So we need to make sure that Pro LS here, that's dangerous. I shouldn't be doing that. Let's see here. Where's my marker? Where's my... I'm just gonna put a very, very subtle mark on here. Easy there. Let's not get too anxious now. All right, another set of bearings. Same deal. So looking for the upper. And we're looking for the lower. Remember the chamfered edge, which is here, is going to go down that way. All right, and that's the back. So let's go ahead and put this pin in here. And then we're going to gently lower this in with my hand down here to try to catch it. Wow, that one goes in a lot easier for some reason. I wonder what's going on there. So now, all right. All right, so now it says, where are we at here? There's no need for piston rings. Lightly lubricate the cylinder walls and carefully install both piston rod assemblies for that crank journal into the block one at a time, tilting the engine on its stand to have the deck surfaces horizontal for each. Don't nick the crank journal on the way down. Install the rod caps temporarily so that the pistons and rods do not fall out when the engine's flipped over. Make the bolts hand tight. We are only using, okay. All right, now on to 17. Checking rod bearing clearances. Install plastic gauge and tighten rod bolts. All right. Now flip the engine over on its stand so that the oil pan mounting surface is horizontal. All right, let's go ahead and do that. Now remove a rod cap and lay a strip of plastic gauge on the upper shell of the bearing. The lower shell in the rod cap and corresponding surface of the crank journal cannot be used. A plastic gauge reading here would only would be adversely affected during subsequent rod cap removal. Use extreme care to not allow piston ring to fall out of the top of the bore while the rod cap is off. Consider installing a TDC stop or similar device as a safety precaution. Also, it is helpful to tilt the engine in its stance slightly, making the cylinder you're working on vertical, albeit upside down, so that the plastic gauge strip rolls to the center of the rod bearing shell. With the plastic gauge in, reinstall the rod cap and make the bolts hand tight, Repeat the plastic gauge installation procedure for the other rod. Now inserting. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and do that first. All right. So what I'm gonna do here is pause for a bit because I need to get my plastic gauge all set up, and I'm gonna see if I can get a helper here to film while I'm doing this, and to make sure the piston doesn't fall out. All right, so we will be back in just a few moments. Okay, now lower this down, let it come down just a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
All right. This is going to be tricky, huh? I shouldn't be doing this with gloves on. In fact, I'll take this glove off.
What is that?
This is called plastic gauge. All right. Now go ahead and push it back up. Go ahead, push it up. All right, perfect. Now hold it right there. We're going to repeat this process on the other side. All right, hang on, let me give it a little bump to loosen it. It's funny. I had them switched.
Uh-oh.
Yep. That's a no-no. All right. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take the cylinder all the way out.
Oh, we are.
Yep. Yep. Here. I'll take over from
Okay.
here.
Okay, you got it?
I got it.
Okay. Letting go.
All right. Here now, can you hold the cylinder or the piston?
Okay.
All right. So one problem was this was supposed to go on the. This is supposed to go on the lower. It's detail. I mean, you have to be incredibly detail oriented. All right. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna put, and this should say upper. It does. All right. We're gonna see how it's easy because this notch fits into here, right? So it makes it easy to figure out what goes where. And then this is gonna have to lay down in the center.
What does that do? That little
This is called,
plastic gauge.
so what happens is whenever these are tightened to their final specs, okay, there needs to be a little bit of, I mean, a fraction, the minutest of all minute space between this here piece that I just put in here where it said upper and lower, these are called bearings, okay? And they allow oil to circulate because this crank spins, okay? And as the cranks, the crank spins because the explosions in the cylinders. So as there's explosions in the cylinders, the pistons are forced to go up, right? Or actually down because this is upside down. And as it goes down, it pushes on this crank and the crank turns, right? But if there wasn't oil in here to lubricate it, what do you think would happen? There'd be friction buildup and it would overheat and it would turn molten red and it would just burn up. And then eventually it would just seize. Your engine would quit spinning. Your engine would be ruined. So there has to be a little space. You can't even see it, but it's there. There's a space between this silver crank and between this silver crank, and I gotta get this oil off here, and this bearing. So what happens is, this is one of the tests that you do. If I can get the cylinder in there, or the piston. Ah, crud. So the plastic gauge has to be in the middle as it makes contact with the... So go ahead and hold it. These are called the connecting rods.
So was the whole point of doing this to put that plastic gauge in there?
Yes. Just hold that right in here. Just push down right on there. Okay, here, back up. £30, 30 pounds, 30 pounds, and 30 pounds, which I've done. And now I'm going to give it 50 more degrees of angle torque. All right, so that's what's got going on here. So you want to see how this works? Oh, never mind. So 50 pounds, ready? Or 50 degrees, that is. Oh, that's pretty tight. All right. Ready? All Oops. All right. So there we have it. Man, this torque wrench works a heck of a lot better than that Quinn brand that I had. Oh my gosh. This is the good stuff. All right. So those are on there pretty tight. So I suspect we're going to need to use the breaker bar to get this off here. All right. Now with the 2 feeler gauges still inserted between the rods, loosen all 4 rod bolts, but only a few threads. You may then remove the feeler gauges. To separate each cap from the rest of the rod, a few gentle hammer taps atop each bolt will likely be needed. This is done with a socket and a small extension. After a cap is loose, and while holding the piston from falling, loosen its bolts the rest of the way. Set the cap aside and remove the piston rod assembly from the engine. You may now measure your plastic gauge. Right now, on the side. Gonna remove the cylinder. Now I'll fall out. Stick me all the way under, basically fall out.
Short answer, huh? Is it short answer? That's it.
All right, which one is that? That's number 1. All right, here. Let's take it out. I'll take it.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. See how the plastic gauge got smashed?
Oh.
See that?
Yeah?
So here what we do now.
It wasn't very much, and it's not even all the way across.
Well, yeah, it's because I put it in crooked. So this is all we're trying to do, is just see how this is matched up. So what are we at there? We're bigger than 3 thousandths. We're bigger than 2 thousandths. We're about 15.
Yeah.
We're about 15 thousandths, and we're not that big. So it's not uniform. So it's like 2 thousandths on one end and 15 on the other. So my gut tells me it's something in between. So it's probably like 17.5 thousandths. Okay. So my job is to look and see if that's within specification. You know? So let's do the other one. All right, here's our plastic gauge. This actually is very uniform all the way across. So this would be cylinder 1. And it's reading it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more than 2 thousandths. All right, and a little bit less than 15. Okay, all right, so here's where we're at now. I've cleaned all the plastic gauge off the number 1 journal. And just for fun, I'll show you one more time. This is the number 1. And we're looking at, what are we looking at here? We're looking at about, it's a little bit narrower than 15 thousandths, not little bit wider than 20 thousandths. All right. So if we go to the book, the book says rod bearing clearances for stock to moderate high performance would be 90 10 thousandths to 25 thousandths. Okay. And then moderate high performance to racing would be 22.5 thousandths to 25 thousandths. All right. So ours falls in between right here. Stock to moderate high performance. So we're more than 0009 and we're less than 0025. We're 0019 is about what I measured there. So anyway, we're good there. Stock to moderate high performance. Check. All right, so moving on. The next step says here, measure rod side clearances. So we're basically going to stick, it says with all piston rods removed from the engine, clean the plastic gauge off. Install the number 1 and number 2 rods on the forwardmost crank journal. Basically just doing what we just did. This time lubricating both the bearing surfaces and the journal. Tighten the rod bolts to specs. Using a feeler gauge, measure the clearance between the connecting rods. All right, so let's get all of the, and then it says for best results, you should install the remainder of your piston rod assembly and repeat the process on all crank journals. All right. So let's go. Basically what we're doing now is we're going to install all the pistons. All right. So this could take some time. So bear with me here and I'll try to fast forward the video. I'll do it in real time for 1 and 2, which actually you've already seen. And then I'll fast forward the remaining pistons. All right, let's get this done. All right, so we're measuring the gap between those two. So I'm just gonna randomly start with this guy right here. All right. Let's get pretty tight. It might be the one right before it. Yep, I think that's it. Because this guy is not, oh, barely. I mean, it crunches when it goes in there. So I'm going to say it's this one right here. And that is, if I can see what, 0.023. What does the book say? The book says Rod side clearance should be between 0.043 to 0.2 for stock steel or titanium. For aftermarket rods, follow the connecting rod manufacturer recommendations. All right, so we are sort of in the upper end of that. All right. Now, if I torque this down, question is it going to matter? So let's go ahead and torque. And remember, it's first we do 30 and then we do 50 degrees. I remember things. All right, so let's put this. Remember 50 pounds. 50 pounds, 50 degrees. It's a nice torque wrench right there. All right, so now we're gonna measure the clearance, and clearly it differs now because I've tightened it down. So let's see what we've got here. We're gonna have to start off fairly low. All right. Actually, it's the same. Huh. Huh. Actually, it's a little wider. Well, there it's getting a little tough. 23. 24 might be it. So we'll say 23 to 24. Well, it says here, rod side clearance should be 0.043 to 0.20 for stock, steel, or titanium. So we've got a bigger gap than that. That's for sure. So the bottom line here is, it says here, for aftermarket rods, follow the connecting rod manufacturer recommendations. All right, so we'll have to look that up. I'm going to do that tonight. And then it says, but honestly, the reading was pretty much the same whether I torqued it down or not. So I think for, it says here, for the best results, you should install the remainder of your piston rod assemblies and repeat the process on all crank journals. For stock rebuilds, you may now remove the pistons and rods from the engine. High performance applications, you must have the rods installed during the next several steps. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and install the rest of the pistons so I could take this measurement for all of them, and then leave them in there for these other steps here. All right, so I will be fast forwarding through that as I go through this procedure. Okay, thanks for hanging in there. I'm back after a little bit of a break here, and what you'll see is I've gone ahead and I have installed all of the pistons and the connecting rods, tightened them down, and basically the last step for basically the lower half of the engine in terms of pre-assembly is to check these clearances, as I've been doing, and spin the assembly and make sure nothing is interfering. So first things first, let me just do a real quick. I've already gone ahead and measured this, and so I kind of have a little bit of knowledge ahead of time of where this is going to sit. But right around 25 hundredths is where this has been. Well, that's a little bit too thick, so let me go back here and let's see, there's 26. Let's start with 23. 23 seems to be what's been working for most of these. Yeah, see how that just barely fits in there? And that's the case with this guy too. Same amount of tension with this guy. All right, so it fits, but it drags. So if I do 24, it's probably not going to fit. Yeah, see, that doesn't go in very easily. That doesn't go in very easily. That doesn't go in. So 23 or 24 rather is the seems to be the magic number here. Now at least it's consistent. That's a little bit out of spec according to the book. It's a little bit bigger than what the book suggests. But it does say for aftermarket rods, follow the connecting rod manufacturer recommendations. All right. So I need to check the manufacturing recommendations because I mean it's so ever so close. It's the upper end of the expected range is 0.02 and I'm 0.023. So I mean it's right there. All right. Now finally, before we get the degree in the camshaft, check rotating assembly clearances, and this says remove your flywheel holding tool, which I've already done. It's sitting right there. Spin the crankshaft over and watch for interference between any portion of the pistons in the crank, rods in the crank, rods in the block. Remember that because metal parts will stretch slightly under stress, many clearances will be even less when the engine is running high RPM. Discuss problems with piston or rod to crank interference with your machine shop. These are not common. If you note too little clearance between the rod and the block, you will need to mark the block at locations, remove your entire rotating assembly, and lightly grind the block with a die grinder. Okay, so we do not want to have to do that. So, I don't know how well you can see. Maybe I'll try to film this with another camera here. So let me get my cell phone. So anyway, well, let's try to film this. But basically what we're doing here is we're turning it over and we're seeing is anything interfering with anything. And you'll see right there. Okay, look how close that is. See that? I'll take a snap photo of that. There we go. Much better focus. All right, so that right there is kind of the thing we're watching out for. Let's see what happens on this bottom end right here. It's really hard to see, but my gut tells me that we're fine. And let's see how much out of the piston, how much out of the bore the piston skirts come. And it looks like they come right to the little dot. See the little dot right there? We'll try to take a picture of that. See that little dot? So let's see what we get on this side. Up right to the dot, right? See that dot right there? All right. What else? We had have to check the reluctor ring and the piston, and I'm not seeing any problem. Look how nicely they designed those pistons so that there's a space down there between, so that it doesn't hit the weight. They cut that out factory-wise, so that was a nice call on their part. And if I come on this other side, you can see similarly on this side, Notice how that weight gets really close, but it's not going to be a problem. That is impressive machine work there. So again, these are the Summit Pro LS connecting rods and pistons. So okay, so once again, you kind of get the idea here of what we're checking out here. We're making sure that these bolts right here do not come in contact with anything. I mean, that's real close, that is a closey right there. That is incredibly close. But I think we're gonna be all right. And the good thing is that all of them, and here's the other side. The good news is that this has been very consistent. So while it's incredibly close, they're all the same, roughly the same amount. So all right, so I think we got everything working here very nicely. Everything spins. Everything, while we do have some issues that are fairly close, there's nothing here that I think is detrimental. So next, we're going to be doing the camshaft degreeing process, and I think for now we're going to just go ahead and take a break. It took a long time to do all this, to put all this together. So I think for the day, I'm probably going to call it a day, and we'll come back and do some camshaft degreeing next time. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for watching this series. Be sure to hit the little bell and subscribe so you get all my updates. Thanks so much.